Chapter 8. The table was, near as Wilkes could tell, black glass. Expensive for an officer's mess on some back rocket planetoid. Course, it could have been made from local mineral and not brought in on ship. Even so, it was not something you expected to see. The chairs were some kind of basic fold-out issue, but they'd been padded and spiffed up by somebody with skill and time. Billy sat to his left, Beulah to his right, the three of them occupying one end of the table. Another dozen people could sit along the sides, but those chairs were empty. Spears sat at the other end, alone. A platter of what looked to be roast meat sat in front of him, aromatic vapours wafting from it. A long knife and double-tine fork were stuck in the meat. "It's not real beef, of course," Spears said. He pulled the knife and fork from the roast and ran the edge of the blade back and forth against the fork tines, as if sharpening the knife. "Protein hard gel and soy. But our mess sergeant has a deft touch with seasonings. It's not bad." With his hat off, Spears was bald as an egg, nothing but eyebrows and lashes, from what Wilkes could see. Spears stabbed the roast with the fork and began to slice the ersatz beef. An orderly, dressed in kitchen whites, came from the doorway behind Spears. By the time the general had the first slab of roast carved free, the orderly arrived and shoved a plate under it. The timing was perfect. Half a second later, and the meat would have flopped onto the black glass. Spears never looked to see if the plate was there. The general repeated the carving. A second orderly scooted from the doorway and arrived in time to push another plate under the falling slice of roast. The third slice, and yet another orderly. It was offhand, but every bit as impressive as a precision drill team tossing carbines back and forth at speed. Spears knew it too. When the plates had been delivered to Wilkes, Billy and Beulah, along with glasses of red liquid, wine, and eating implements, the general carved himself a slice. The fourth orderly was a bit slow. He thrust the plate out, caught half the roast. For a second, it looked as if the fake meat would flip from the plate and smack onto the table, but the orderly juggled his cargo and managed to slide the slab back into place. It left a smear of gravy on the white plastic, but stayed put. Spears' jaw muscles tightened once, then his face relaxed into a somewhat forced smile. He nodded at the orderlies. "At ease, troopers." The four orderlies filed out via the door by which they'd entered. Wilkes would not want to be the last one, the one who had nearly bobbled the general's own meal. He had very nearly made the general look bad. On a military base, that was as dangerous a crime as a soldier could commit. The general raised his glass. "To the core," he said. What the hell, Wilkes thought. He lifted his own glass, noticed that Billy and Beulah did the same, albeit without much enthusiasm. The wine wasn't bad. Wilkes had surely drunk a lot worse. "Eat," the general said. The cook was inspired, Wilkes had to admit. The counterfeit beef was as good as any he'd ever had. Right texture, right flavour. If Spears hadn't told him, he wouldn't have known the difference. Not that he got a lot of real meat of the money he made anyway. Rabbit now and then, fish, even chicken on special occasions. That was about it. Last time he'd had what was supposed to be certified beef had been at his old Top Kicks mustering out party a couple of years back, bio time. Given all the suspended animation travel since then, it was a lot longer in real time. Whatever was going on inside Billy's head, Wilkes could see she was enjoying her meal too. As for Beulah, who knew? His model of android could eat, even cut in half as he was now. Whether he enjoyed the food in the same way a basic stocked man did or not was something else. "Food okay?" the general asked around a mouthful of it. Wilkes nodded. "Very good." Billy and Beulah also nodded and mumbled something. This was strange territory, and wherever this conversation was going, they decided to play along. For his part, Wilkes was pretty sure this guy's wingnuts were dogged down too tight. It didn't make sense to set him off until they had some idea of what he was all about. "You'll have to excuse my somewhat abrupt manner when we met," Spears said. "There's a war on. One can't be too cautious." He smiled. Jesus, Wilkes thought. It looks as if his face might crack from the strain. This cocker wanted something from them. That was plain enough. But what? It has been brought to my attention that you've had considerable experience with wild strain aliens, Sergeant Wilkes. Wilkes chewed on the beef, swallowed it. Yes, sir. Spears popped another chunk into his mouth and chewed it thoughtfully. Been in combat against them in several theatres, correct? That's right, General. The man nodded. His eyes seemed to take on a brighter gleam. Good. Good. He looked at Bueller. And you, Issue, your injury was sustained in combat as well, was it not? Yes, sir. These men are military, Marines. I know about them. What about you, little lady? Wilkes saw that Billy couldn't bring herself to speak. Sir, he put in, Billy was on Rim during first contact with the aliens. The only survivor. The General raised one of his thick eyebrows. Is that so? Dumbly, Billy managed a nod. She survived on her own for more than a month, Wilkes said. The General's other eyebrow went up. Really? Most resourceful. How old would you have been then? 10, Billy managed. Another of the face-threatening smiles. Excellent. He ate another bite of the meatless meat. I envy you three. Do you know that? You've been in combat against the toughest enemies, the most dedicated soldiers men have ever faced. Perfect troops. Fearless, tough, almost unstoppable. Your survival is quite an achievement. A fluke, really, but no less heroic for that. He pushed his plate away. Less than half of his meal was eaten. An orderly zipped in from the doorway, removed the plate, refilled the General's wineglass, and vanished almost without a sound. Spears leaned back, sipped at the freshened wine. The only way to beat an enemy as hard as the one man now faces is to use troops of equal vigour, ones who can match the ferocity of the opposition. That got through to Billy. You're trying to raise tame aliens here. With the proper leader, my troops could spearhead the retaking of Earth, Spears said. Think about it. What better way? The wild strain behave like ants. With troops of equal caliber, plus proper strategy and tactics, they wouldn't stand a chance. Billy started to say something. Wilkes kicked her under the table. She closed her mouth. Great idea, sir, Wilkes said. The General nodded, pleased. I knew you would see it so, he said. You've been up against them. You know how little chance humans or even specially bred androids have. He nodded at Bueller, gestured with his wineglass. How can we help, sir? Wilkes said. Billy looked at him as if he'd lost his sanity. He kicked her under the table again without changing his expression. If Spears noticed Billy's look, it didn't seem to register. Your experience, Sergeant. I have computer-generated scenarios, recordings of battles on Earth, theories. You three have been there. You know the reality. I want your advice, your knowledge. My troops must be as well prepared as they can be when I formulate my strategy. Certainly, sir, Wilkes said, stretched his own scarred face into a smile. Bueller and I are Marines before anything else. And Billy wants to help too. Isn't that right, Billy? Billy nodded. Right. Spears was practically beaming now. He raised his wineglass. A toast, then. But before the General could offer the toast, the Major came in via the same door the orderlies had used. Spears frowned. What is it, Powell? Sorry to disturb your meal, sir. A security breach. The guard on the south lock has been assaulted. The outer door burned open. One of the land crawlers is missing. The General waved a hand. Oh, that. Powell blinked. Sir? This is my base, Major. I try to keep up. He looked at Wilkes. You have to stay on top of things when you're the CO. Enjoy the rest of your meal. You are free to go anywhere on third base. You have full clearance. If you have any questions, Major Powell will be happy to answer them. I suppose I should go and see to the malcontents who have destroyed military property. With that, he stood, gave Billy a military bow that was barely a nod, and left with Powell. Wilkes stared at the general's back as he left, wished that he had a gun at that moment. In the hallway, Spears said to Powell, "Keep an eye on them. Put the android in rehab. See if we can give him mechanicals or whatever so he can be ambulatory." "Sir." "And that guard from Southlock. Put him in the egg chamber. He fucked up." Spears felt a happy satisfaction at watching Powell swallow dryly when he gave that order. The universe had become a place where only the strong, the ruthless, could survive. Sentiment was for another time, in the past and, someday, when he had won this war, in the future. Meanwhile, somebody had to make the hard choices, and Spears was the man to make them. Billy found she was shaking. She wasn't sure if it was because she was afraid or angry. She stood, but Wilkes was right there. He hugged her, and before she could do more than stiffen and start to pull away, he whispered, "Play along, Billy. They probably have a cam on us and a voice recorder." She relaxed a little. "What?" "If we don't do what this guy says, he's going to feed us to his monsters. Play along." The thought of that turned her bowels to lumps of dry ice. For a moment, she couldn't even breathe. A Marine private entered the dining room and started to wheel Mitch away. Billy turned quickly. "What are you doing?" "Major's orders, ma'am. Taking the AP to rehab." "Why?" "Don't ask me. I'm just doing what I'm told." "It's okay, Billy," Mitch said. "It's like putting your flitter into the shop for repairs." Billy stared at him. The Marine wheeled him away. "Relax," Wilkes said, his voice at normal volume. "The general just wants to make sure his troops are cared for properly. I don't know what kind of facilities they have here, but my guess is they can fit Bueller into some kind of lower body exoframe, at least, so he can get around on his own." Billy couldn't think of anything to say. This was all so damned weird. "Come on, let's explore a little. Might as well get acquainted with our new home, eh?" He winked at her. Billy nodded. She understood. The more they knew about this place, the better. "Yeah," she said. "Good idea."